All right, welcome back. This is it. You're almost done with the first of only 2 tasks in the writing section. We're almost to the very end of this course, the entire course. So, today we are talking about not only the master skills of the first integrated task. Well, it's the only integrated task, but it's the first task on the writing section, and that is the academic topic summary. So it's very similar to the combining informations task, and it's so easy that even a monkey can do it, as long as you know how to do it. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be talking about the tricks and the traps, the strategy, and the master skills all put together. Now, as I mentioned, this task is very similar to the combining information task from the speaking section. The only difference is that you have a lot more time to do it, and of course that you'll be writing your response instead of speaking it. Also, the actual reading passage and the audio file is a little bit longer than the combining information task, as I mentioned in the summary for this particular task. So let's go over it. Now, basically, you see with the example, let's go to the example notes here. On the page with the example notes, I showed you with this particular reading passage an example of the type of information that you would need. Now, as with this particular example, the main topic wasn't until the very end of the first sentence. That's actually fairly common because anytime there's a reading passage, if anytime that someone is writing something, they don't usually come out in the first sentence and say the topic of this writing is blah, 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 because that would be boring. So usually there's some sort of introductory information that leads up to what the main topic is. And here, the main topic was that our people think that our robustus was an active hunter. And then here, however, closer analysis says that this is unlikely. So that's the main topic, that some people think it was a hunter, but there's, some possibility that it's not. As you can see, I wrote down the topic is the hypothesis that it was unlikely. And then with the other topics, this one I mentioned that this is kind of different because they have 3 different paragraphs. Usually there's only 2 subtopics, but like I said with some of the other examples earlier on in this course, I like to put some that are a little bit more difficult into this course. That way, once you get to exam day, you'll be able to totally dominate and master every part of the entire course. So the first paragraph always has the main topic, and it usually either introduces the subtopics or it leads into them. And then with the subtopics, they usually do put the main information of the subtopics or the supporting details in the beginning of each of those paragraphs. So then that's really what you write down in your notes. You have the main topic, possibly some other information, and then using a very traditional style of taking notes, you just write down what those supporting details or subtopics are. Now, once you get to the listening file, this is where all of the really good information is, because as I mentioned in the summary, and also just like with the combining information task, this right here is not going to be the majority of what you talk about. The majority of what you're going to be talking about is what is in the lecture. However, everything that is in the lecture is going to be talking about what's in the reading passage. So basically, this person is going to be covering all of the main details that you see in the reading passage, and then you will be speaking about what this person is saying, making references to what is in the reading passage. So you don't have to give a big, long description of what's in the reading passage, because you're going to do that when you're writing your response about what was in the speaking section. Because this person here talks about the fact, well, in this particular one, she's giving more information about what was written in the writing section. So this is the main focus, what's in the listening file. And as with the combining information task, one of the main things that you had to do there, and also with this task, is that you have to show the relation between the 2 pieces of information, the reading passage and the audio file. So that's actually very easy. Like I said in another page on this course here, that you don't even have to do that as a separate thing. That happens naturally just by describing this, because you can't talk about or write about what they said in the lecture without also mentioning this. But just like with the combining information task, when you said, like you mentioned the reading file. In the reading file, we learned about this, this, and this, but in the lecture, we learned about this. You can also make references when you're talking about what was in the lecture as you're writing your response. So maybe as you're writing your response, you would say something about the person in the lecture mentioned that even though the reading passage mentioned that the R. robustus was as small as a domestic cat, they also mentioned that it's possible it could have hunted babies. So you'd use this back and forth method. Even though it said this in the reading passage, the lecturer said this in the audio file. So this back and forth method like that, it works with any of the different forms. Like I mentioned here, you have to talk about if it provides more information, it explains this further by talking about, gives an example, the speaker provides more examples of this by mentioning. It's the same phrases, the same type of style as with the speaking task. However, no matter which one of these that the lecturer is doing, you can still use this back and forth method. So if they were providing more information on a different example, of course, maybe they would say, well, they talk about this topic here, and the lecturer gives us an example of this by talking about that. But in the second point, they also mention this, and the lecturer or the professor, whatever words you want to say, gives another example about this. So no matter what they're doing, as far as what the style is, providing information, giving example, or disagreeing or contradicting, you can still use that back and forth method. And really, that's it. You simply mention what the main idea is and what the supporting details are, and then you write about what the person in the lecture spoke about, making reference to those main idea and supporting details. That's it. Really, it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And then once you get the structure, you just use the other examples that we have in this course. There are 3 examples here. The example notes and the example response, we're using one of the examples, but of course you can still practice with that, just using your own writing response. And that's it. So now let's get on to the very last task in the TOEFL exam. All right, so thanks for stopping by, and we will see you in the next lesson.